people think that plants are almost human. While not going quite that far myself, there's no doubt they respond to love, care and attention. Plants need fresh air, warmth and comfort, food and water. And if they look unhealthy, there's more often than not a simple solution that will put them back on the road to good health. Now, this video shows you how to care for your houseplants, how to feed them, how to propagate them, and what to do if they're unwell. You should always remember, houseplants are fun. However big your houseplant is, or how small, there's a right way to care for it. Now treat this video like a dictionary. Look it up when you need help on a particular point. It's divided into short chapters and the booklet is part of it. They go together. Now these beautiful plants here are really flourishing, thanks to the care given them by the Chelsea Gardener staff here in Enfield. Now I'll hand you over to our expert, Jock Davidson, who is consultant to one of the largest houseplant suppliers in the country. So, who better than Jock to give us the ground rules which will help us help household plants and get maximum pleasure and enjoyment from them. Hello, Jock.
Hello.
What's this?
This is a beautiful thing called a parasol plant. Most houseplants need fairly bright light if they're going to do well, so you need them nice and near a window. But you must also remember when putting them near a window that they want to be protected from drafts.
The area is either side of the window or normally in deep shade, but our eyes don't usually see it like that. A very limited number of plants like direct sunlight, like these cacti and some flowering species. The vast majority should never be exposed to direct sunlight. Plants with variegated leaves especially need a lot of light to keep their contrasting colours. If they don't get it, they turn pale or simply go green all over. There are some plants, like these ferns, that are happy in a shady place. All houseplants hate drafts, especially the exotic varieties, so make sure your windows are sealed against them. You may not notice them, but they could be like howling gales to your plants. And it's not just front and back doors or windows that cause them. It can be inside doors that open and close frequently. You must also watch out for the hot air from radiators. A plant's delicate leaves can be dehydrated all too easily if it's placed too close. A shelf covering the top of the radiator gives excellent protection.
When plants leave a greenhouse, there's various things that they're going to miss. They're going to miss the care of the professional grower and the warmth and that sort of thing. But one of the things that they will miss almost more than anything is the humidity that prevails in the greenhouse.
The best way you can provide the right humidity for your plants is to stand the pot in a tray of pebbles, which are kept constantly wet. The evaporating water is absorbed gently by the leaves of the plant. The pot must stand on the pebbles and not in the water. Otherwise, the compost will be waterlogged and the roots will soon start to rot. Healthy roots on an African violet should look like this, white and strong, with the compost holding firmly together. Instead of standing your plants in a single tray, try arranging them grouped on a large tray filled with some 2 inches of gravel. Here we have an ivy, a begonia, a kalanchoe, maidenhair fern and African violets. In winter, if you have central heating, you can use this type of humidifier, which you just have to top up with water. They make sure that your room doesn't get too dry.
When you have rooms that are heated by gas fires, it will help the humidity factor if you have a dish in front of the heater appliance and you can keep it topped up with water. But there are other sorts of gas fires, and when you have units that use bottle gas, this can be harmful to quite a number of plants.
Perhaps the most popular way is overhead spraying with one of these. Use regularly, that could be daily in a hot, dry summer, with the mister set at a fine spray, so that no droplets fall directly onto the leaves. Be sure not to use this type of spray when your plants are resting, nor when the temperature is low, and never in bright sunlight.
You will find that during the summer months, say from late April through to the end of September, that your plants will be growing very much more actively.
In winter, growth slows right down, and if you force your plant to grow by having a high temperature during the short winter days with poor light, you'll get straggly, weak growth from which your plant may never recover. Give them their rest. They've earned it. This will conserve their energies so that they put out new, healthy growths in the spring. You'll then have healthy plants like this. Some flowering plants like cacti and orchids need a winter's rest, otherwise they won't flower like this and this. It's best to choose the right plant for the particular room. For a room which is always cool, choose hardy plants like pot chrysanthemums or kalanchoe or plumbago or ivy or a beautiful castor oil plant like this one. So many of our houseplants are from the tropics and want reasonably high temperatures all the year round. They're ideal for warm living rooms where the temperature will never drop below 15.5 centigrade, that's 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Generally, plants like an even temperature, one that doesn't vary wildly. Don't forget that warm, centrally heated rooms tend to be dry, so choose types that can take it, or make sure that the humidity is right. So, here's an easy rule to remember. Warm temperature, maintain humidity. Low temperature, keep dry. Cold plus wet equals death.
When it comes to cleaning plants, there's many of them that are neglected and others that are overdone.
Hardy plants like this rubber plant can be sponged with soapy water. Treat plants with slightly hairy leaves with great care. Just brush them lightly with a soft brush to remove surface dust and any debris. Remove any damaged leaves at the same time. Plants like ivies with many small leaves are difficult to clean. Just cover the pot and soil in polythene and immerse the leaves in a bucket of soapy water and sponge them down. The tender new leaves on plants like this monstera shouldn't be cleaned at all, or touched in any way for that matter. Chemical leaf cleaners can really improve a plant's appearance, but be sure to follow the instructions with the greatest care. Always test a little on one leaf first, low down on the plant, and leave it for a couple of weeks before treating it all over. Always clean your plant in average temperatures above 60 degrees and out of the sun. Be sure to let them dry thoroughly before putting them in direct sunlight.
Watering is about common sense and good judgment, and that is to say you should water your plants when they need it and never water them for the sake of it.
You can be sure that if you give your plant too much water, it'll die, and if you give it too little, it'll die. Study your plant's needs and respond to them. Avoid the midday period, as water splashed on leaves of a plant like the African violet could cause scorching if exposed to the sun when still wet. The best time to water any of your plants is first thing in the morning or in the early evening. Advice on how much to water your plant in the summer is based on warm to hot weather. So if the weather isn't too good, ease up a little. If in doubt, there's a good maxim: don't water. During the winter months, when growth slows down, plants need much less water. Once a week is enough for most. For cacti, it can be much less. From October to March, cacti need no watering at all. Cacti that aren't watered at all in winter tend to grow and flower much better. Whatever the plant, before watering, check that it really is needed. When the plant needs the surface to dry out between waterings, you should stick your finger well in so that you can feel beneath the immediate surface. One of these water meters is the best way of measuring if you're in the slightest doubt. Here's Jock to show you what too much water does.
You can get a sodden plant, and one of the things I would like to show is the actual amount of water that you can give a plant thinking that you're doing what should be done. And very often we're recommended to put the plant in a saucer. When you do it this way, you don't get water onto the leaves. And I think this is an important requirement, not to have water on the leaves of African violets or on the flowers. But when you do it this way, the soil in the pot these days is nearly all peat. It acts like a sponge, draws the moisture up, and I would just like to show you the amount of water that this poor plant has had. You can see it's got its crocks in the bottom of the pot, so somebody had a lot of consideration for it. But when you look at this, and you can see just how much water has been absorbed by the soil, not by the plant, but by the peaty compost, all that has been absorbed. And very much too much for a little plant of this kind. Careful when you stand them in dishes of water and allow them to, I think the term is allow them to drink up all they want.
To water properly, the compost must be thoroughly watered every time, which means allowing the water to run out of the hole at the bottom of the pot. Allow the water to drain out before returning it to its saucer or container. Generally, never allow plants to stand in water. When soaking a plant like this Busy Lizzie, be sure to let all the air bubbles out of the soil. Remember that plants that are kept in a window should be kept moist all the time, but never soaked. Another difference is the type of pot you use. Plants in clay pots will tend to need more water than plastic ones. So soak clay pots before use, and they should always have crocks. One last rule on watering: always use tepid water. Cold water straight from the tap can give your plants a nasty shock. Fresh compost has natural nutrients which will feed your plant for about 3 months, but after that it's up to you to see that they're fed. Only feed your plants between April and September. If you feed in the winter, you'll only help force that weak, straggly growth. Never feed any plant to excess. There are many brands of plant food, but never use them without reading the instructions on the label. Generally, plants should be fed once a fortnight. Plant foods come in liquid form, which are diluted in water. Never give more than recommended. It won't do your plants any good. There are powders too, which, when mixed with water, are applied in the same way. But do read the instructions properly. This is what is meant by a level teaspoon. There are also solids, which are a good idea if you're inclined to be forgetful. They're good for hanging pots and baskets. Read the instructions. More than one may be needed. Just press it into the soil and it will release the plant foods over a period of weeks. They last for 2 or 3 months, but don't forget, you'll still need to water.
Now this sort of plant, this cactus here, would appreciate being watered during the summer and the spring, and it will also appreciate being fed with a fertilizer of some kind. But there are actually specialized fertilizers on the market, and this one is for treating cactus and orchids, which are both very similar.
As a general rule, flowering plants need potash and foliage plants need nitrogen to get the best results. Choosing your pot need present no problem, as there's bound to be a clay or a plastic one that suits the needs of your plant. Clay pots have a lovely natural look, but they break easily and are comparatively expensive to replace. Plants in clay pots need watering more frequently, and yet it is easy to waterlog them, so be sure to use crocks. As they're heavy, they don't topple so easily if you have a tall plant. If they stain, a good scrub will get them clean again. Chinese ones can have nice designs. Plastic pots have a wider range of sizes and colours. Some are very bright, and they're better for some peat composts. Plants in plastic pots need less watering, but are more likely to become waterlogged. They're very easy to clean and don't damage easily. But they too can crack and break. They're also cheap to replace. Plastic pots are very light and easy to unbalance with a tall plant in them.
Now, it would be very simple if we could go out into the garden and with a spade and a bucket and dig up some soil, come indoors and pot up our plants. And just to give you some idea what you can find in the garden, I've been out and dug up some soil, put it in a pot, and I've brought it indoors. And this is what I found. There's weeds in it. It's heavy. It's no doubt got some bugs. Oh, here's one. There's a bug, unexpectedly. Bugs as well. And the soil is very, very heavy, so that when it becomes wet, it's going to stay as a tight, heavy mass that's never going to be any good for any sort of plant. But fortunately, we can buy different soils, and one of the most famous of all potting composts is what is known as John Innes compost. Now that is composed of 7 parts of loam, 3 parts of peat, 2 parts of sand, with the appropriate amount of fertilizer added. But personally, I'm not a great liker of John Innes as it stands, because for the majority of houseplants, it's inclined to be too heavy. So you want something to lighten it up. And one of the things I often do to lighten John Innes, if I make my own, is to reverse the loam and peat ingredients, so that you have 7 peat and 3 loam instead of 7 loam and 3 peat. And that will give you a lighter sort of mixture to work with.
You can buy compost which is nearly all peat. But even this type can get waterlogged and very heavy, so it's a good idea to add a lightener. Jock uses perlite, which leaves the soil much more open. He also adds a potful and a half of grit to help drainage.
Thoroughly mix that together. And one of the things about a soil really is like this mess here that is straight from the garden. If you're a good gardener, you should be able to put your hand into the bag and you should almost feel that you could eat the soil. It should feel good. It should not only look good, but it should feel good in your hands when you run your fingers through it.
Always buy your composts from a reliable supplier. Soils that have been on the shelf too long lose their goodness. When you are potting on, always choose a pot the next standard size larger than the original one. These are the standard sizes: 9, 13, 15 and 18 centimetres. Now let's see Jock pot on an asparagus fern.
What you have to do when you go to pot this, I think the important thing would be, first of all, to give it a dunk in the bucket of water, so that you're not going to damage the roots too much when you take them out. You squeeze the pot and the plant will slide out of the pot very simply. If you take it out of the pot and you don't see a massive roots around the soil, then you can put it back into the same pot and leave it for a few more months. But when you see this sort of thing, that plant obviously needs potting on.
If the new pot is plastic with lots of holes, you won't need crocks. Put in a little compost, enough so your plant stands just below the rim. Then pack in the compost all round, gently with your fingers. You should then water it and leave it for a couple of weeks. Low-growing plants like the African violet should be potted in a half pot. It'll look much better. Check the roots after watering and place the plant to one side. With the little compost in the bottom, place the old pot inside the new one and pack the space between the two. You'll now have a neat hole exactly the right size. Firm the plant in gently.
If you use the same method as we used there, you can pot things as awkward as this chlorophytum. So you can slip off the hanger, you can take off the bottom pot if you have a mind to, but again you would water it, and again you would squeeze the side of it, and again you would take it out, and as you can see, there is nothing quite like a chlorophytum once it's happy and growing away well. And this is all root, as you can see there. Now again, we will set the plant happily on the side, or maybe we'll put it further back and you'll be able to see better. And we can select another hanging pot, as you see there. Now the way to do that again would be to very simply slip off the hanger, and we will pot this one that the chlorophytum was growing in the larger pot. And for the chlorophytum, you don't want a light soil, you want something with a little bit of body to it. So you want to have a good amount of loam in the compost, and that will sustain it over a longer period. And then when you've finished, you should have something looking a bit like that. Yes. Your chlorophytum, which is sitting on the side here, and maybe we'll give him a little dunk in the water before he's potted. And that will cheer him up more than anything. And then he fits absolutely perfectly into his new hole. And you can put a little bit more soil around the top to finish it off. And as we did with the other plants, when you've done that, you water it, and then you leave it for a good 10 days before you think of watering it again.
Whether you're going to propagate from seeds or a cutting, you're going to need the right equipment. This will include a really sharp-bladed knife, a good pair of scissors, a selection of small pots, rooting powder, Some plastic bags as well as some canes, large glass jars and rubber bands for making propagators. A small propagator would be very useful too. You'll need a compost which is all peat with a little sand and some perlite. This will keep the compost open and encourage good roots. Propagating is done in a number of ways, depending on the plant and its condition. You can propagate by leaf cuttings, leaf pinning, stem cuttings, division, offsets, rhizome division, air layering, and of course from seeds.
Now, African violets or Sympholeas are some of the most popular of all the houseplants that we do. And they're also relatively easy to propagate. If you've got a warm situation, give them a temperature about 65 to 70 degrees in a warm room, out of bright sunlight, and they should be no bother. Now, the first thing to do to learn about propagation is that you get like from like. If you take off a very indifferent and ragged cutting of this nature, you're going to get a very poor plant if you get a plant at all. So you really want to remove good firm leaves. They don't have to be large leaves. They can be quite small, as you see these here. So you remove firm leaves, reduce them to about 1 inch in length, and then you want to dip them first in water, and then you dip them in the rooting powder. So you dip that in, and then you put your cutting in the hole with the leaf facing into the inside of the pot, so that when the cuttings begin to grow, they will grow up into the light, and they will do that much better. You don't want to hold too deep, and just press them in gently. Water first, powder, nasty old hole, drop it in. And then if you're only doing one potful, you can do them in this fashion and put the pot with its cuttings into a polythene bag, a couple of canes to prevent the bag sagging down, a tie on the top to keep it airtight, and you virtually have a little transparent greenhouse. Now this is a clump that's made from a single leaf. If you were to put that in the pot as it is, you would get a very indifferent sort of African violet plant. They would have lots of leaves and flowers pushing up trying to best one another. If you tease them apart, you'll find that it's a clump of individual cuttings. And if you pull them apart, you'll find that you've got little plants with their individual roots, individual stems, and even the tiniest little bits will root quite happily, even pieces like that. And what you do then is if you take a small pot, you needn't be too fussy, you can make a hole with your finger, and you put your cutting in, not too deep, and in fact you might finish up with something looking like this. You see where you have a flat rosette of leaves coming from the center of the plant, and all the flowers standing up in the middle and being set off much more attractively than if the leaves and flowers were coming up together.
Ivy is a most flexible plant. It'll grow almost anywhere, indoors or in the garden. It's simple to propagate from cuttings like these, and they come in a variety of colours. Small-leaved variegated ivies are the most simple to propagate. Each cutting should have 2 or 3 leaves, and make them long at the bottom and short at the top, so you know which way round to plant them. And there's no need for rooting powder. They grow very easily. Don't just put in one, as it will take a long time to make an attractive plant. Put them in groups like this, and it looks right straight away. If you use a propagator, fill it with a variety of cuttings. A little warmth on the bottom will encourage growth. Keep the vents closed until the cuttings start to grow, when they can be opened up a little at a time. Eventually you can lift up the edge of the container and when they're really strong, remove the lid completely. Begonia rex will propagate from leaves and stems. This is how you grow from a leaf. You take a single healthy leaf with no blemishes. Cut off the main stem and then make a cut into the remains of the stem. The best cuttings will come from this section. Now, make a few shallow cuts into the prominent veins on the underside. It's from these cuts that the new growths will appear. If you serrate the edges, you may get more growths. The leaf will be pinned in a seed tray with peaty compost, perlite and a little grit. Make a hole for the main stem and pin the leaf down, right side up, making sure that the cuts are touching the compost. Use little loops of wire for pinning down to prevent the edges from curling should it get dry. Keep it moist, but not wet, at around 70 degrees. Put the propagator lid on and a little warmth from below will also help. Cover as before, and soon small plants will grow from the cuts. With cacti, it's easy to propagate from seed. You can see them growing on this free-flowering rebutia. It's also possible to take cuttings. Leave it to dry for 24 hours and then pot it in special cactus potting compost. Don't water it until it starts growing. You can do the same with bunny's ears. They have sharp prickles, so use tweezers or a paper wrap to hold it and cut it firmly through the stem. Use cactus compost again. Be sure to let it dry first. 3 or 4 make a nice display for this particular plant. Dividing must be the easiest ways to propagate, as all you do is divide your plant into 2. It's the best method with aspidistra or sansa or this spathiphyllum.
Now the idea is that all these little pieces will make separate plants, and you can cut down through the roots and tease them apart. It's not a job to worry about. You're going to lose some roots anyway, and this is what you will have. Now if you're really needing a lot of plants, you could cut all these pieces individually. Maybe we could cut through there again. And that way, you see, even these little bits would make plants and as individual. And then you would fill in the intervening space. And with a spathiphyllum, you can be a bit brutal with it and pot it fairly firmly, because as you could see with the initial shot, that we had lots of roots on the plant.
Offsets are growths near the base of some plants like cacti or the bromelia family such as this acmea. These make good cuttings. Soak the plant first. When you cut them away, make certain that there's a fair amount of root to support its new independent life. Allow it to dry before potting it in peaty compost. Air layering is the best way of dealing with a large leaf plant which has grown too tall or has lost its lower leaves. Let Jock show you.
And you can see with this one here, we've lost several leaves on the stem, so the plant is not all that beautiful. And the first thing you're going to do, you need a sharp knife for this job. We're going to cut off a couple of leaves, and they will bleed a bit, but that's not going to worry us. Another leaf off, and now we have a nice clean area in which to work. But the first thing I did was to put a cane into the plant, and it was tied above where I'm going to cut and below, because where you cut through the stem of the plant, it weakens it, and this cane will help to support the stem. Now the next thing you have to do is that with a sharp knife you cut into the stem, as you see there, about halfway through the stem, and then you turn the knife and you cut in an upward direction. It'll be a bit messy, maybe a job that would be better if two people were doing it, but I work better on my own. And you cut up to there, yes? And you've opened this up. Now if you simply put the moss around at that stage, the cut will heal over and the plant won't produce roots where you want them. So what you have to do is either put a match or a piece of stick into the cut there, and that will hold it open. Now the next thing is to put a little rooting powder. It'll be a bit messy, this. A little rooting powder around where you've made the cut, and that will induce the plant to root more readily. So that is the first stage in the air layering of a rubber. Now the next thing you need some what I would call good quality moss. That's a nice fluffy fresh moss rather than something that's tired and a bit dusty. And you want 2 handfuls of this. You want to put a handful of moss each side, and it wants to be moist. You don't want dry moss. You want to have it nice and moist. You want some around there, some around here, and press it together. Hold it tightly together. You'll almost feel the moisture oozing from it as you work. And then you have your length of polythene, and it's got to be a reasonable length so you can get well above the actual, we'll take another leaf off, above the moss and below the moss, so you can tie it nice and secure. And it will take something like 6 to 8 weeks before the roots are visible, during which time you might have to pour a little water into the top here so that you keep that moss as moist as you possibly can. So that's the next exercise. You hold it tightly in position, and then you have your string to tie it together. And as I said, you could probably do this more easily with a helping hand, but you want it fairly tight so that you don't get too much air getting in to dry out the moss. You have your knife handy to cut it away, and then hold it again together quite firmly at the base, and you tie that in a knot that's not going to slip, such as that. Very good one I've done there. Whoops. And that virtually is your plant air layered. It's going to, where we made the cut, it's going to root into that moss, and you'll actually see the roots forming through the polythene. Now when you've got a good amount of root in there, when you can see quite a lot moving around in the moss, the thing to do then is you have to cut the stem of the plant below where the actual rooting is taking place, cut it through to about there, take the polythene off, take a little of the moss off, and then allow the cut that you've made to dry. Maybe treat it with a little of the rooting powder again, and you'll get the plant to root there as well. And having done that, you pot this section into a pot about the same size as the one your plant is growing in. It is important to take the polythene off. I once had a gentleman demonstrate how this should be done, and when he made the cut, he cut it above where the roots were, which was a bit negative, really.
Growing from seeds or pips is always rewarding. Line your seed tray with crocks for good drainage and fill it with fine special seeding compost. This will have little or no fertilizer in it. You can add about 1/5 in volume of sterile vermiculite to help root growth. Firm the mix evenly all over and plant the seeds about 1.5 inches apart in neat rows. You'll just scatter small seeds. Cyclamen seed should be soaked in water for about 24 hours before sowing. Don't forget to label with the variety and sowing date. Place a sheet of glass over the top and shield the young seedlings from strong light with newspaper when the first shoots appear. Keep the tray in a warm place. When secondary leaves show, it's time for potting. Seedlings of any plant should be handled very gently, and instead of potting straight away, put them back in a tray of fresh compost, giving them a little more space. They'll tend to do better this way. When your seedlings have reached this size, it's time to give them individual pots. If a plant suddenly starts to look sick and stops growing, you need to act promptly, as firm action more often than not saves the day. But do inspect your plants carefully when you're buying. Make sure it's pest and disease free. These are the simple remedies which you'll need to deal with the diseases and pests you're most likely to come across. Generally, diseases can be controlled with a benomyl fungicide and pests with a branded insecticide. Grey mould is a fungal disease which appears on leaves, flowers or stems, which eventually rot. It's grey and fluffy. You'll find it on begonia and cyclamen. Cut away all affected parts and spray with a fungicide and move the plant to an airy position. Mildew is fungal too, and is white and powdery and appears on tips of shoots and on leaves. Begonia and grape ivy can have it. Cut away the affected parts and remove soft leaves, wipe off hard leaves and move the plant to an airier place. Plants with larger leaves can develop moist brown spots, known as leaf spot. Remove the affected leaves and burn them, then spray the plant with fungicide. Don't mist the plant and keep it dry for a couple of weeks. Now for some of the most common pests, and aphids are probably the most common. They can be green, orange, grey or black. They suck the sap and seriously weaken the plant. You'll find them on lots of plants. Watch out for the soft tips of ivies and hibiscus buds. They're usually in clusters under leaves. Spray with a Deris or Malathion insecticide every 2 weeks. Woody plants and cacti are the favourite haunts of the mealy bug, this woodlouse look-alike pest. They cause the same sort of damage as aphids, and they make a dreadful mess in time. They are covered in a white mealy web. If you catch them early, spraying with the Malathion insecticide will do the trick. But if they're very well established, you'll have to paint each one with methylated spirits. Red spiders are the most damaging of pests, and they're barely visible. Like aphids, they suck the sap from the leaves. This Calathea louisa has a very bad attack. The symptoms are very dry leaves around the edges, and on the underside these pit marks. Regular misting helps, as they like hot, dry conditions. Leaves develop fine, pale blotches, and if badly affected, drop off. Here on an aspidistra leaf are the discoloration and pit marks that can only mean red spider. Spray weekly with a Deris or Malathion insecticide. These round brown scales are scale insects. They're also sucking the sap, often on the veins on the underside of leaves or on the stems of woody plants such as Ficus benjamina. If a leaf is badly infected, remove it and burn it. Another pest that makes a dreadful mess in time. But it is sometimes possible to knock them off a leaf or wipe them away with meths. Then spray with a Malathion insecticide. These are small white flies which suck sap from the underside of leaves such as fuchsia. They spread from plant to plant. They need to be dealt with thoroughly. They're extremely difficult to eradicate. Remove all infected leaves and spray every 3 days with Deris or Malathion insecticide. Do not attempt this method with fuchsia or poinsettia, as it'll mean removing every leaf. Of course, houseplants can be attacked by common garden pests like caterpillars, slugs and snails. Simply use your hand to remove them. You can keep the soil free of pests by using a systemic insecticide, like this stick which is pushed into the soil. They also come in liquid form for watering in or spraying on the leaves. Remember to burn all infected material. Don't put it in your compost heap. And don't use infected plants for propagation. One last maxim. With pests, prevention is better than cure.
Jock, that was really interesting. Thank you very much. Well, Jock has certainly helped me, and if you've enjoyed this video, you'll be pleased to know that it's the first of a series. So be sure to watch out for the next one.
Be sure to look out for other leisure video titles on gardening, the home, cooking, health, beauty, fitness, sports, children's titles and games.